Revealed. My daughter-in-law a shocking ultimatum while living free in my home for 2 years. Margaret sat in her modest living room, once filled with laughter, now suffocated by tension. The weight of her son Jake and daughter-in-law Sarah's financial burdens hung over her like a thick fog. They had fallen on hard times, and with a big heart, Margaret welcomed them into her home, pushing aside her own worries about her mortgage. But that was 2 years ago. Now the atmosphere was crackling with unspoken problems, simmering beneath the surface like a pot about to boil over. One crisp morning, the sun barely peeking through the curtains, Sarah dropped the bombshell. The word struck Margaret like a physical blow, an ultimatum to leave her home, so they could transform it into a nursery for their future children. Margaret felt as if the ground beneath her was disintegrating. The house where she had poured her love and sacrifice now became a bargaining chip in Sarah's mind. Was this what family support meant? Was all the love she gave merely fueling their dreams while erasing her own? Torn between her nurturing instinct and the suffocating dread of being cast aside, Margaret felt her heart rate spike. She had dedicated her life to the well-being of others. Yet here she was, standing on the precipice of rejection. Questions raced through her mind. Didn't she deserve a sanctuary after all these years? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days turned into weeks, the growing rift became palpable. Each meal felt like a chore, fraught with strained silences. Margaret's resentment simmered beneath her professional demeanor, tightly braided with pain. No longer a haven, her home felt more like a prison. Would it be such a crime to want her space, to reclaim her identity? Yet the guilt consumed her. Wasn't family about sacrifice? Each sleepless night left her lost in a whirlpool of emotions: anger, betrayal, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of confusion. Jake, her beloved son, hovered in the middle, his expressions shifting from support for Sarah to guilt over his mother's suffering. He wanted to ease the tension but felt powerless, a tether caught in a tug-of-war, teetering on the edge. Margaret's eyes would search for him during meals, desperate for a sign that he understood her anguish. Instead, she saw only shadows dancing across his face, hints of his internal conflict. Every time Margaret walked down the narrow hall, memories clung to the walls like ghosts: family gatherings, holidays filled with warmth and a sense of safety. Now the laughter had been replaced with muffled arguments, echoing through the cozy home she built. The love she had woven into the very fabric of this house now felt like a curse, binding her to a painful reality. The moment came when she was finally pushed to the edge. She confronted Sarah in an anguished showdown, laying bare not only her frustrations but her deepest fears. Yet, Sarah's vulnerability surprised her, sharing scars of abandonment. Struggling dreams flickered like dying embers. Could their connection hold weight amidst such palpable tension? As razor-thin walls began to crumble around them, Margaret stood teetering, gazing into the abyss of uncertainty. Would they break apart or rebuild? The answer hung cruelly out of reach, the night heavy with unresolved tension. In the flickering light of the next day, Margaret found herself staring blankly at her half-finished coffee. The confrontation with Sarah had opened a wound she had long since ignored, forcing her to grapple with feelings that bled into unexpected territories: anger fused with empathy, despair twisted with hope. The house, a mere structure, was morphed into something deeper, an emblem of her complicated legacy. Determining to take a step back from the storm within, Margaret ventured into the world beyond the walls of her home. The outside air felt different, invigorating. She sought solace at the local park, a sanctuary of nature that mirrored her longing for peace. With every step upon the gravel paths, Margaret took stock of her life, her forgotten dreams and stifled ambitions, all overwhelmed by care for Jake and Sarah. As she rounded a corner, her gaze fell upon a small green garden center. The vibrant blossoms called to her and urged to nurture, unaware of her inner chaos. She entered, immediately surrounded by fragrant blooms and reassuring greenery. One of the shop assistants noticed her hesitation and approached with a warm smile. "Are you looking for something in particular?" she asked. Margaret shook her head, her voice soft. I think I'm just searching for something I can tend to. Something that can grow. An understanding flickered across the woman's face, as if she sensed the complexities behind Margaret's words. Plants can teach us a lot about growth. Sometimes they need light and space to flourish. The conversation lingered in her mind, a simple yet profound realization. Could she find a way to cultivate her own life again? She purchased a small potted fern, something resilient and easy to care for, but capable of thriving if given attention. As she paid, the associate slipped an extra packet of seeds into the bag. These are for you. A little challenge: grow them from scratch. Margaret left, clutching the small plant and a glimmer of hope. Back home, she placed the fern on the kitchen table, a new symbol waiting to be nurtured amidst the existing turmoil. Later that evening, Margaret reached for her laptop. She hadn't revisited her art in years. Charcoal sketches and watercolor paintings collected dust in the corner of the attic. Dusk settled around her as she typed in art classes near me, a flicker of excitement igniting within. Could she reclaim that part of herself, that artist who used to breathe life into canvases? Each brushstroke in her mind seemed to paint a new narrative for her life. As she scrolled through local listings, her heart raced with anticipation. The thought of taking a class, committing to personal growth, it felt liberating. But with that exhilaration came the old specter of guilt. Could she invest time in herself when Sarah and Jake were struggling? Margaret plucked at the fern's leaves, the weight of her fears amplifying her uncertainty. Who would she be if she strove for her own aspirations? What if devoting time to her passions strained her already fragile family dynamic? These conflicting emotions swirled within her, cultivating both fear and resolve. Perhaps reclaiming her identity might serve as a beacon they could learn together, the value of nurturing oneself while supporting one another. That night, as she lay in bed, the seeds of an idea began to bloom. Tomorrow, she would confront Jake about her desire to explore art classes. The discussion could unearth opportunities for understanding and reconciliation. The thought energized her, eclipsing the shadows of her previous doubts. With a newfound determination, Margaret drifted into a restless sleep, her mind alight with images of colors, brushes, and the firm belief that drawing boundaries would allow her to grow. The dawn of realization broke in the form of a single question. What would Jake say when she finally voiced her ambition? Margaret woke up with a jolt, the sense of urgency pushing its way through her scattered thoughts. Today was the day she would reclaim a fragment of her identity, a brave endeavor, yet tinged with anxiety. The morning light streamed through her bedroom window, illuminating the untouched artwork crammed into the attic. She felt a quiet determination settle over her, urging her to move beyond the confines of self-doubt that had shackled her for too long. After breakfast, she found herself standing in the living room, peering at her son Jake, who was engrossed in a video game, his concentration apparent in the furrow of his brow. The very sight of him stirred a mix of tenderness and trepidation within her. How could she address her passions without seeming selfish? The thought gnawed at her as she nervously paced, her feet tapping lightly on the hardwood floor. It was moments later that Sarah entered the room, bleary-eyed and sulking. The tension of their previous confrontation still lingered in the air. Margaret felt a tug in her heart, a reminder that her children's struggles were real and present. Yet she could no longer disregard herself. "Hey Jake," she began, her voice trembling slightly. He looked up, a hint of irritation crossing his face as he realized she was intruding on his game. "What's up, Mom?" Taking a deep breath, Margaret steadied herself. "I need to talk to you about something important." "It's about me." Greedily, she watched Jake's expression shift from indifference to curiosity. It was now or never. "I've decided I want to take some art classes. It's something I used to love, and I think it could help me feel more like myself again." A long pause followed her admission. Margaret could practically hear the gears turning in Jake's mind as he processed her words. She noticed the way his shoulders stiffened, instinctively readying himself for the worst possible response, the one that would label her a selfish mother. "Art classes? Seriously?" he replied, incredulity evident in his tone. "I didn't know you were even into that stuff anymore." For a brief instant, she allowed herself to feel seen. It was as if her creative spirit, long buried beneath layers of family obligation, was momentarily recognized. "I used to be, and I thought maybe it's time I explored that part of myself again. It doesn't mean I want to support you and Sarah." But his eyebrows knitted together, heavy with doubt. What about everything else? You've got us to worry about. Isn't that more important? Margaret felt her heart clench. The familiar guilt gripped her again, but this time she fought against it. I want to be supportive, and yet I can't ignore my own needs anymore. I believe that if I am fulfilled, I can be a better mother. This could be good for all of us. A moment of silence stretched between them, the air thick with unspoken words. She searched Jake's eyes for understanding, and a realization hit her: this was not merely a conversation about art. It was about identity, boundaries, and the struggle to balance self-worth with familial duty. That's fair, I guess, he finally muttered, his voice softer. But what if it gets in the way? What if it doesn't help? Mom, are you sure you really want to do this? Margaret squared her shoulders, feeling a rush of emotion. She needed him to comprehend her intent. I have to try. For both of us. Love can't be about sacrificing everything. It also involves showing your true self. She could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes, but doubt still gripped him tightly. Okay, but maybe talk to Sarah first? She has been really stressed lately. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Could she confront Sarah again? This time armed not only with hopes but with a semblance of self? In that moment, Margaret realized this was only the beginning of a long road toward self-exploration and recovery. Before she could dwell on the apprehension coursing through her, her decision solidified. She would seek out Sarah and lay her desires bare once more. What would her daughter-in-law say when Maggie thrust her own aspirations into the open? Would their confrontation yield grace, or was a reckoning imminent? Margaret took a deep breath as she turned to the stairs leading up to Sarah's room. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heart pounding not just with trepidation but with a growing sense of purpose. This moment was pivotal, an intersection of past decisions and future aspirations, where she hoped to reclaim her voice. Reaching the door, she hesitated, her hand poised to knock. She imagined Sarah's worn face, lines of stress etched deeper by the weight of their previous arguments. Would revisiting this strained relationship provide understanding, or would it dig up resentments they had both tried to suppress? Finally, she rapped softly at the door, half hoping Sarah wouldn't answer. Instead, the door creaked open, revealing her daughter-in-law with disheveled hair and weary eyes that instantly shifted from surprise to guarded concern. Mom, Sarah said, her voice flat. What's going on? I'd like to talk, Margaret managed, her anxiety bubbling beneath her resolve. She stepped into the room, the air thick with unspoken tensions. The walls, lined with Sarah's frantic sketches and exam notes, stood silent witnesses to the chaos that had unfolded over the past few months. What is it? Sarah asked. Crossing her arms defensively, Margaret cleared her throat, trying to suppress the quiver in her voice. I need to share something important with you. It's about my plans. A plan? Sarah's tone shifted to skepticism. You mean like that other time you wanted to please? Hear me out, Margaret interrupted, wrestling down the discomfort rising within her. I've decided I want to take art classes. I've neglected my passion for far too long, and I think it's time I embrace it again. She watched Sarah's expression flicker, surprise mingled with something else. Perhaps disappointment? Art? Seriously? I thought we agreed you need to focus on helping out more around here. Margaret felt a rush of irritation mixed with desperation. Helping out involves a lot of things, Sarah. I want to support you, but I can't deny my own needs. I believe finding fulfillment will make me a better mother and grandmother. But Mom, you don't get it. Sarah snapped, her voice escalating. You think I don't want you to be happy? But you've got your hands full already. What if this just makes things worse? Margaret felt the walls closing in around her, but she chose to stand her ground. I haven't received much support for what I need. You've relied on me for so long. Now it's my turn to rely on myself. Invalidating her own feelings just to pacify Sarah felt like a lifetime's burden, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could bear it. I love you and I want to help you, but this can't come at the cost of my own happiness. I can't be your emotional crutch anymore. There was a pause, a moment where Margaret dared to hope for understanding. Sarah's eyes softened ever so slightly, revealing a hint of vulnerability beneath her frustration. I guess I get it. It's tough for both of us. Margaret breathed a sigh, the weight lifting just a fraction. I want us to work as a family, but I need to carve out this space for myself too. But just as they seemed to find common ground, Sarah stepped back, her expression shifting into a mixture of regret and resolve. So what are you saying? That you'll leave me to deal with everything alone? You're saying you're going to prioritize your art over me? No, that's not what I mean. But before she could finish, Sarah waved a hand, her tone rising again. Maybe you should think about how your decisions affect the whole family before doing this. Maybe this isn't the time. Margaret felt her heart sink. How had this conversation spiraled so soon? She had envisioned creating a bond filled with empathy. Yet again she stood on the defensive. With one blow, Sarah placed her ambitions in direct opposition to her family's needs, leaving Margaret with an unsettling choice. As the silence thickened like fog between them, Margaret knew this was more than just a simple family dispute. It was a fault line that could either ignite a breakthrough or lead to deeper fissures. Could she navigate this conflict as she prepared to pursue her dreams? Sarah, Margaret began. But the words caught in her throat, grappling with doubt. What if she was risking everything she had built? The moment thickened, and she realized she faced not just Sarah's fears, but her own fragility as a mother and artist. Would she maintain this fragile balance, or was it time to truly confront the upheaval? As Margaret stood on the precipice of decision, her mind churned with the gravity of the moment. In the brewing storm of emotions, one question hung heavily in the air. Would prioritizing her needs sever the connection she held dear, or could it lay the groundwork for a more profound understanding? What lay ahead could redefine not just her relationship with Sarah, but who she was becoming. Margaret stood frozen, grappling with the escalating tension that enveloped the room. Her heart raced, conflicting thoughts colliding like storm clouds. Sarah's outburst echoed in her mind, but beneath that anger was a profound fear of losing control over their circumstances and, perhaps more painfully, of losing her daughter-in-law altogether. Taking a few tentative steps further into the room, Margaret focused on finding her own voice amid the cacophony. She understood that her aspirations to reclaim her identity through art felt threatening to Sarah, whose world revolved around overwhelming responsibilities. Yet, she couldn't let fear dictate her choices any longer. Sarah, I get that I've taken on a lot of responsibilities, she began, searching her daughter-in-law's face for a trace of softness that would allow them to reconnect. But if I don't start finding joy in my life, I'll lose pieces of myself. Our family needs me to be happy too. The silence hung between them, heavy and charged. Margaret could sense that her words were more than veiled attempts to justify her decision. They were heartfelt declarations of her desire to be whole. Feeling emboldened, she pushed further. This isn't just about me. I want to encourage you to chase your dreams too. What if we both found ways to pursue our passions? We could inspire each other. Sarah's brow furrowed deeper. You think it's that simple? You don't see how I'm drowning here. I'm trying to balance everything and now you want to add to the load? Margaret's frustration bubbled up. I would never add to your struggles intentionally. But this is about my journey as much as yours. When I was younger, I put my art aside for the sake of others. Can't you see I want my life to be rich for you, for the grandkids, for everyone? But first I need to nurture my own spirit. Margaret observed Sarah grappling with her thoughts. The hesitation in her posture began to shift, signaling that perhaps there was a door opening for dialogue. Each word from Margaret echoed with more courage than the last. She recalled her years of forgoing her dreams, feeling diminished, disregarded, and invisible. In her resolve to change, she felt a flood of empowerment surge through her. The clock ticking on the wall amplified their silence, marking time slipping away while both women wrestled with their emotions. Margaret composed herself and softened her tone. I know it's a difficult situation for us both. But this journey to reclaim my love for art isn't about abandoning you. It's about finding the balance we desperately need. Sarah's expression began to shift. The tinge of anger started fading, replaced with the dawning of something that resembled understanding. But what if she hesitated, her voice smaller? What if I really need your help right now? What if you can't just drift off and explore your art while I'm here, struggling to keep everything together? Margaret weighed this potential vulnerability, her heart aching at Sarah's words. I will always be here for you. But it must be a shared effort. We have to communicate openly. This isn't just a decision I have to navigate alone. You're part of it too. As Margaret assessed the room, She noticed the vibrant sketches that once reflected Sarah's dreams contrasted starkly with the current environment filled with fatigue. Would they continue to let resentment overshadow their potential for authenticity? Just then Sarah took a deep breath, the air heavy with unsaid words. "So what now?" she challenged, confusion and hope mingling in her tone. Margaret sensed an opening, a glimpse of partnership. "How about we commit together to being more honest about our needs? We can try working on our goals as a team. I can take one class and you can share any stressors you're feeling daily." The prospect of merging their struggles with supportive dialogue settled into the room, creating a bridge of possibility. But just as Margaret's heart began to lift from the weight of uncertainty, Sarah's eyes clouded with another unfurling concern. "Okay, I'll consider it. But there's something else weighing on me. We need to talk finances. If you're stepping back for art." Then Margaret's stomach twisted, anxiety clawing at her resolve. The shadow of what Sarah might reveal next lingered in the atmosphere, a stark reminder of their tangled relationship. "Sarah, But before she could process the implications of a financial conversation, Sarah cut in, her voice hardening again. "This affects us all. We need to lay it all on the table now. No more half measures." Margaret nodded slowly, sensing that the next conversation could either free them or entrap them further in complications. A heavy dread seeped into her joyful determination, and she braced herself for the deeper truths that were about to surface. Was she ready to uncover what the future might demand, both of her and Sarah? Would this new approach finally allow them the space for both their aspirations to coexist? Or was it merely an illusion? As they prepared to delve into what lay ahead, the tension thickened, setting the foundation for an even more crucial turning point in both their lives. Margaret held her breath, the air between her and Sarah thickening with unspoken worries. Her mind raced through the various financial scenarios, a daunting maze of numbers and responsibilities that had loomed over their household for far too long. The prospect of their discussion unearthing truths she had hoped to avoid sent a wave of unease washing over her. "Before we go any further," Sarah began, her tone growing brittle, "I want to talk about how this change is going to impact us financially. I can't do everything alone, Margaret. We both know the mortgage isn't going to pay itself, and with your newfound desire to create art, what does that mean for our budget?" Margaret felt her defenses rise instinctively. The art classes she yearned for felt like an ember of hope amidst the darkness of her insecurities. Yet now they seemed to drip with implications of guilt. "I understand, but what if pursuing my passion could inspire us all? What if this could benefit your workload? Please let us approach this with an open dialogue." Sarah crossed her arms, and for a moment, Margaret viewed the rigid stance as an emotional barricade rather than a form of protection. It was as if Sarah feared any glimpse of vulnerability. "I just don't have the energy to dissect this right now, Margaret. What I do know is that we need help with basic living costs, groceries, everything. It feels like instead of finding a balance, you'll just be adding yet another challenge for me to juggle." Margaret winced at the sharpness of Sarah's words. The tension coiling tighter in her chest, she struggled to sit with the discomfort. "You're right. It's unfair of me to expect everything to magically improve without addressing these real concerns. But I don't want to sacrifice my needs either." The realization hung between them like a heavy curtain, revealing an unexpected truth. Margaret had been marginalizing her own aspirations to maintain harmony. It was time to shift that narrative. "Sarah," she said slowly, thinking through each phrase, "if I can find a pathway to happiness, I believe I can contribute more meaningfully. It's not about drifting away. It's about replenishing my spirit, something I fear is fading." "Maggie, I get that, but what good does it do if you're following your dreams while I'm here feeling suffocated? There's a deadline on rent, bills piling up, and I'm tired. I'm tired of being the only person rallying to keep our financial heads above water." Sarah's voice wavered slightly, cracking open a window through which Margaret could see just how heightened the pressure was becoming. Margaret found her footing in that fragile moment. "What if I looked into options that would allow me to mesh my art with some income? Perhaps I can take courses that could also lead to workshops or events that generate funds. This doesn't have to be all or nothing." Sarah blinked, surprise fleeting across her features, clarity half emerging. "But that's more effort. What if it doesn't pan out? What if we're still left hanging there?" Margaret's heart sank at the growing despair implied in those words, but she felt her determination rise. They were both standing at a crossroads, facing personal aspirations intertwined with financial burdens. I know it's daunting, but what alternatives are left if we continue to drag our feet? I refuse to be limited by fear. We are at a pivotal point, Sarah, and we must meet it head-on. The brief silence suffocated the space, filled only by the tick of a nearby clock. It became clear to Margaret that they were confronted with more than just financial discussions. They were standing on the precipice of transformation. If both women committed to unearthing their needs, perhaps they could balance vulnerability and strength. Finally, Sarah nodded, though her expression was still hesitant. Okay, let us explore that. But I need you to promise me you'll stay grounded in reality as you chase these dreams. If we're going to work together, it has to include your commitment to our current situation. Margaret felt gratitude unfurl in her chest, pushing against the weight of anxiety. You have my word. Let us be honest together. But Sarah, there's one more thing. If I take a class and you support that, is it possible we can finesse a budget that can accommodate this? Before Sarah could respond, a loud knock on the door interrupted, jolting both women out of their heated exchange. Margaret's stomach dropped at the unwelcome interruption, her body tense, instinctually knowing that whatever or whoever was about to enter could very well shift the delicate foundation they had begun to establish. Who was it that stood on the threshold now, ready to complicate their dialogue further? The interruption came in the form of a man, tall and imposing, his shadow cast across the threshold in stark contrast to the dim, warm interior of their home. Margaret's breath hitched as she recognized him. Tom, Sarah's estranged brother, who had long been a source of friction in the family. His unscheduled arrival brought with it a whirlwind of unasked questions and thickened the already fraught atmosphere. "Hey, is Sarah here?" he asked, the casualness of his tone clashing with the tense energy filling the room. Margaret shot a glance at Sarah, whose face had drained of color. Torn between familial loyalty and the urgent need to stabilize their fragile discussion, Sarah silently battled with the decision to let him in. She finally exhaled, steeling herself. "Yes, Tom. Come in," she said, her voice steadied but unsure. Tom stepped inside, his presence filling the small space tangible and suffocating. As the door clicked shut behind him, Margaret felt an unsettling rush of irony. Here they were, trying to create a safe space for vulnerable discussions, only to be confronted with a storm. "What's going on?" Tom questioned, observing the tension with an astuteness that made Margaret uncomfortable. She instinctively drew her arms close, as if shielding herself from the scrutiny. Sarah hesitated, then took a step toward her brother. "We were just discussing some changes at home." Margaret caught the shift in Sarah's demeanor, how her posture straightened, as if rallying around a familiar defense mechanism. It was a topic they had broached before, one that always led to confrontation between them and ultimately to disappointment. "Changes? Looks like more than that, if you ask me." Tom's gaze darted between them, a frown forming. "You okay, Maggie?" The concern behind the question felt disingenuous, and Margaret bristled. "I'm fine, Tom." "Really?" she replied, her voice firm yet edged with irritation. "I get it," he said, dismissing her reassurance with a wave of his hand. "But family's important, and I can't help but notice you always seem to be on the outskirts of these chats. What's going on with your art stuff anyway?" His inquiry felt pointed, as if he wore a hidden agenda beneath his casual veneer. Margaret felt a familiar surge of defensiveness rise within her, the urgent desire to reclaim her narrative battling the instinct to withdraw. She and Sarah had just begun to carve out an understanding, and now this intrusion threatened to collapse their moment, spilling their plans into uncertainty. "Tom," Sarah interjected, her voice rising with an urgency that turned heads. "This isn't the time." But Tom pressed on, his tone shifting ever so slightly, a hint of accusation creeping into his words. "Why are you two acting like it's not a big deal? You're chasing dreams while I'm here picking up the pieces of this broken family. You want to put art over actual survival?" The very sound of the words hanging in the air was suffocating. A chill crept in, layering doubt over Margaret's earlier resolve. What if pursuing my art could anchor this family instead? Margaret stepped forward, the suddenness of her action startling both siblings. "I'm not abandoning anyone. It's part of finding my purpose, Tom. You may not understand that." Silence enveloped the room, thick and oppressive. Margaret's heart raced, each beat echoing the confrontation, rapidly spiraling into a grueling contest of wills. She had laid herself bare, exposing the vulnerability of her aspirations against a backdrop of familial expectations, and the silence. Sarah's eyes met Margaret's, a flicker of solidarity igniting between them. Would this moment fortify their shared understanding or unravel it further under Tom's abrasive scrutiny? Tom's expression was unreadable. Margaret braced herself for the storm to come. Ultimately, the tension swelled, pregnant with unsaid truths and impending revelations. Could Margaret reclaim her voice amidst the looming onslaught of familial expectations? Or was that very pursuit of personal authenticity destined to lead to an estrangement even deeper than before? As the weight of their quiet hung heavily, it became painfully clear that they could all feel it. The family was on the brink, and the next word spoken would tilt the scales one way or another. What would happen when the tentacles of underlying resentment finally loomed large above their heads, waiting for release? Margaret's mind raced as the pregnant silence continued to stretch on, each moment thickening the weight of impending conflict. She could feel the fraying threads of her patience, her dream to embrace her art now at a precipice against familial expectations. This was the moment she had long feared, standing on the tightrope between pursuing her aspirations and tethering herself to the weight of family obligation. "I don't expect you to understand, Tom," she finally said, infusing her voice with newfound determination. "But my art is not just a hobby. It's my lifeline. I can't keep plowing through life without honoring what makes me me." Tom flicked his gaze away, his expression a storm of disbelief and frustration. "And what about the rest of us, Maggie? You think we're just supposed to stand by while you chase your dreams? This isn't just about you." A knot tightened in her stomach at the realization of how different their perspectives had become. Where did loyalty turn into suffocation? She pulled herself up, letting the adrenaline feed her resolve. "I never meant to say it was just about me. But I've been invisible for so long, trapped behind a facade of what others want me to be. It's suffocating." The words hung between them, a haunting echo of her buried fears. Tom studied her with renewed intensity, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes until it was snuffed out by barely contained resentment. "Letting your dreams take precedence will only dismantle this family further," he shot back, his voice sharp as glass. "You're risking everything for something impractical." Margaret's heart raced with indignation. Did he always perceive her aspirations as a threat? She had come here to carve out an avenue for herself, not to bulldoze through the family dynamics that had long been simmering beneath the surface. Impractical? What's impractical is living a life dictated by fear, she exclaimed, her voice rising. "I deserve to explore what inspires me without feeling guilty for dreaming." In that moment, she could feel Sarah's presence beside her, a soft anchor amidst the storm. Sarah's eyes were wide, betraying a mixture of surprise and pride, urging Margaret to continue. It was as if they were casting their lines out into turbulent waters, struggling against the tidal waves of history and disappointment. Tom's brow furrowed as he absorbed the gravity of her response. "You could lose everything, us, this entire family. Are you willing to gamble with it?" Margaret paused, weighing her words carefully. Was it worth the risk? She felt a surge of both trepidation and adrenaline. This was more than just an argument. It was a confrontation with her own authenticity. "I can't live in this shadow anymore," she finally replied, her voice steadied but laced with vulnerability. "What if losing the semblance of stability means gaining myself? I can't be part of a family that doesn't accept me fully." The room fell silent again, the weight of her admission settling heavily upon them. She could feel the layers of resentment concurrently unraveling and entangling them all in a different way. Tom's expression shifted, hints of confusion colliding with dogged persistence. "What if I told you this wasn't just about you anymore?" Margaret's breath caught in her throat as the unsettling implication of his words rippled through her. What other revelations lay in the shadows unbeknownst to her? The air crackled with unspoken grievances, the storm threatening to erupt. She took a step forward, ready to stand firm in her convictions, but Tom suddenly spoke over her, and what he uttered could change everything. "The time has come to face the truth. This family is not just fractured. It's on the brink of collapse, and all that's left is an ultimatum." As the finality of his words echoed in her chest, She realized they were no longer just bickering siblings. The stakes had transcended the personal and leaped into a familial reckoning. Would she and Sarah hold their ground, or would Tom unveil secrets that forced her into a position of reconsidering everything? Margaret's thoughts swirled as Tom's words settled heavily in the air. The ultimatum hung over her like a dark cloud, thickening the tension between them. Her mind raced, grappling with the implications of what Tom might reveal. This was no longer merely her struggle to define her identity through art. It felt like the very foundation of their familial bonds was fracturing under the pressure of unspoken truths. What did Tom mean by this? Wasn't he just about you anymore? Was there something lurking beneath their family dynamics that she had failed to perceive? Such questions tangled in her mind as she clung to the fragile thread of resolve she had just begun to weave. It was a ticking time bomb. She sensed the urgency to unravel the complexities of her relationships before all of them blew apart. In a sudden flash, she recalled her last exhibit, how the vibrant colors and the raw emotions poured onto the canvases created a layer of herself that she had long hidden. What if she channeled that energy into confronting Tom? What if she transformed this precarious moment into a catalyst for change, not just for herself, but for every unsaid word that had lingered in their family? Tom, she said, her voice steady and resonant with a fierce calm. Before you say whatever it is that's bothering you, I want you to understand something. I am done hiding. If this family is on the brink of collapse, then let us face that together. Let us face the real issues without holding back. She could see the hesitation in Tom's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that suggested he was not fully prepared for her declaration. It validated her inner voice, bolstering her courage. No longer would she stand at the edge of her own dreams, awaiting permission to step forward. Maybe you're right, Tom replied, pausing to gather his thoughts. This has become more complicated than we ever realized. You think you're the only one suffocating under a facade? You should know I carry this weight too. His voice trembled slightly, revealing fragments of vulnerability. Margaret took a step closer, lowering her voice to draw in the gravity of their shared reality. Then let us talk about it. Let us stop pretending everything is fine. What's really on your mind? Tom opened his mouth, hesitated, then closed it again, revealing an internal battle that raged within. He wasn't alone in this. They were both navigating the storm of expectation and despair. The realization struck her if she was going to stretch beyond her dreams, they both needed to confront their discomfort. Maybe it's time for some honesty, Maggie, he finally breathed out. Yet the words were tinged with a hesitation that only emboldened Margaret's resolve. The atmosphere shifted. With the faintest glimmer of a breakthrough, Margaret felt her heart race with a blend of fear and anticipation. This was a stark departure from their previous skirmishes filled with defensiveness. It was ugly and raw, but it was also necessary. Tell me, she urged, her voice becoming an echo of both compassion and persistence. What do I need to know? But before Tom could respond, Sarah shifted her weight beside Margaret, drawing attention back to the unyielding silence that engulfed them. The urgency of their conversation seemed to hang in the air, waiting on a precipice ready to spill secrets unfurling like the very canvases she longed to paint. In that instant, Margaret realized they were standing at a quintessential fork in the road. Would they push through the discomfort to unveil the truth? Or would they retreat into the comforting denial that had kept them afloat? Margaret set her jaw, preparing herself for whatever lay ahead. I want honesty, but more than that, I want change. If the foundation is collapsing, let us reshape it. Tom's eyes widened, the weight of her declaration pressing down upon the room as the air itself thickened with possibility. You're right, but change comes at a cost. Are you prepared for that? And just like that, the stakes rose, setting the stage for revelations that would alter everything. Would they muster the courage to face the upheaval, or would the family threads fray beyond recognition, leaving Margaret standing alone once more? Margaret took a deep breath, gathering her courage as they stood on the cusp of a critical conversation. She could feel the wavering tension coursing between them. But now she was not just an artist seeking validation, she was a mother determined to redefine herself while standing firmly beside her family. Change requires work from all of us, she said, her voice unwavering. We can't ignore the realities of our situation, but we also can't continue to stifle our individual dreams. I won't let fear suffocate my spirit any longer, and I refuse to let our relationship be dictated by unspoken resentment. Tom's eyes flicked from Margaret to Sarah, and then back to her, gauging the atmosphere. But you have to recognize the risks, he said. You don't get to just chase after hobbies while the rest of us are trying to stay afloat here. His voice, though pointed, carried a hint of vulnerability. That's just it, Margaret replied, her heart racing but her conviction solid. I want to create a life that balances personal fulfillment with family responsibilities. If I don't claim my passion and express who I am through art, I might lose sight of my very identity. We'll end up resenting each other if I stay stuck for the sake of the family. Sarah watched as the weight of Margaret's words settled within her. This was new and authentic conversation about their desires and fears without defensiveness overshadowing them. Tom shifted uneasily, as if her perspective had begun to reshape his own. Maybe we need to address the budget, Margaret suggested cautiously, her mind racing with possibilities. But instead of me decreasing my contributions to you two, how about I find a way to contribute through my art? There are community offerings where I can teach classes, expand on my skills, while generating some income. Could be a win-win. Tom blinked slowly, absorbing the suggestion. You really think you can make that work? I have to believe it, Margaret affirmed, showcasing the solid confidence reigniting in her spirit. And I need your belief in me as well. If I'm part of this family and we're in it together, support needs to flow both ways. I see what you're saying, Tom replied slowly, the harsh angles on his face softening a fraction. It's complicated, but maybe it's worth exploring. If you could make a little extra on the side, maybe that eases some of my financial burden. But you need to be realistic, too. The path forward began to reveal itself, awash with potential. Sarah, slightly hesitant but curious, chimed in. Well, we're trying to launch our nursery, could include art-themed workshops for children. If you could also hand-paint some nursery decor, that might be something we could all benefit from. Margaret felt the lightness brought on by Sarah's suggestion, deconstructing some of the walls between them. Here, in that pivotal moment, she could visualize a collaboration rooted in respect and mutual support. That's brilliant. Our strengths can create something more meaningful if we find our rhythm together. Tom's expression morphed from skepticism to curiosity, glimmers of hope inching through as he considered the possibilities that could unfold. How soon do you think you could put together some kind of plan? Margaret's heart soared with the shift in energy among them. She felt a sense of belonging unraveling, threads entwining into a tapestry of shared dreams. I will start tomorrow. It's time I plan around my art as a viable part of our family's future. As the emotional weight lessened, Margaret registered the thrill of finally emerging from under the shadows of guilt, a profound transformation taking place within her. No longer merely a support system, she was reclaiming her identity, her integrity shining through. The adults caught their breaths, recognizing the monumental shift in their dynamics. Their family wasn't just surviving. They were now forging ahead, each of them learning to define their aspirations without guilt. There was still an uncertain road ahead, but for the first time, Margaret felt equipped to navigate it with intention and clarity. As they sat there, confronting the looming challenges head-on, Margaret realized her journey towards personal fulfillment wasn't just an isolated mission, it was how she would finally elevate those she loved, while claiming her rightful place within the family unit. In the tapestry they were weaving, Margaret stood strong. She had proven her courage, and it had cultivated a rich soil from which the seeds of their dreams might finally sprout, nurturing their relationships and individual selves as they let their aspirations fly. Each of them, in their uniquely battered but hopeful ways, had transformed not just as individuals but as a family ready to embrace the beautiful complexities that lay ahead. It was time to act with purpose and fortification, cultivating their stories and genuinely caring for one another. This was the new chapter of their lives. Now you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion. This is the moment to show your support for personal overcoming stories.